Christopher Ross's career has included Blackout, Yesterday, and The Swimmers, and his new project is the blockbuster FX limited series Shogun. Christopher, from the start, obviously, it's apparent that this adaptation of Shogun is extremely faithful to 17th century Japan across the board. And I guess just in general, how did that impact your approach here and your choices as cinematographer?
Yeah, I guess there's two sides to the faithfulness. So one, it's sort of architecturally faithful and character faithful to medieval Japan as close as humanly possible. And then on the flip side, it's sort of, you know, the Western, the idea of a Western that has fed into Akira Kurosawa and the Seven Samurai, and then fed obviously into Magnificent Seven, then into Star Wars and the lightsaber battles, and then the lightsaber battles are now feeding back into. So the idea being that we were trying to be from a utterly faithful to medieval Japan, but with a Western narrative cinema gaze from the 21st century.
And so then how did
I
you
guess
blend
that was
that, I
the
guess? Yeah, no, that makes sense. How did you blend that? And then also like you're mentioning like all these great things like Star Wars, Akira Kurosawa, but like so make it feel original, but also like in reference to that. You know what I mean? Like it's not like you're directly referencing that stuff, but people obviously know that stuff. So how do you like make it feel original, but also like blending? How do you blend that all together?
yeah. Well, so I guess the first port of call for so Shogun is a Jedi genre film, which are the kind of like a Jacobean tragedy made in the traditional Japanese style, and therefore we could approach it like Seven Samurai or Throne of Blood or Kurosawa. But the one of the very interesting things with the from the script that Justin and Marks and Rachel Kondo had put together was a retelling of the narrative of the novel from a kind of multi-protagonist perspective.
Mhm.
So therefore the visual kind of philosophy came from a truthfulness to the way that light enters medieval Japanese buildings, and for that we did a whole heap of research. So that was sort of the lighting reference, and then the camera operating and the movement of the camera and the choice of focal length and the choice of composition was done because we wanted to have a much more visceral first person storytelling where we were able to jump from protagonist to protagonist. So although Blackthorn in the novel is clearly the protagonist, what we set out to do was to allow an audience to take allegiance with the different characters. So you want to be able to you want to be able to fall in love with Mariko. You want to be able to see the rivalry between Yabashige and Toranaga, and the only way to really do that is to walk in their shoes. So it was about this sort of first person perspective of being able to move around, and that's a much more contemporary camera technique, I would say.
Definitely. Did you for Blackthorn character, obviously, like I think it subverts the general notion of like a white savior story so much. Was there anything you did, and the perform I think Cosmo's so great in it, and like his performance is awesome in the writing. Is there anything you're doing visually to like undercut that as well, like for the audience, like subtly even or anything, or is it just kind of like no, because it's in the writing and the performance?
It's a combination. It's in the writing and the performance. It's in the screen direction, primarily within the scripts. But I guess most significantly is that uh, the way, yeah, the lens and compositional choices. So in the early episodes, we wanted Toranaga and Mariko, who translates for him in those early scenes, to be partnered in an alliance, and likewise we wanted to see that Blackthorn and Mariko were on the cusp of an alliance. So there's lots of framing choices where one character is one character is foregrounded, and a character who's not necessarily speaking or being spoken to is just over that character's shoulder. So it's sort of subliminally and subconsciously saying this person is in an alliance with this person, etc., etc. And so that was the way that we chose to yeah, look at the blocking of the scenes and the framing of the scenes.
Really cool. You mentioned like obviously all these characters. I think one of the reasons why people really love this show is obviously it's like a big spectacle show. Like we said, like there are battles and stuff, but like these characters are fantastic. The actors are amazing, and it like is very you get all these intimate moments and like really kind of great scenes. And I guess for you, yeah, like capturing those performances and like kind of really they're very quiet performances too, right? You know what I mean? Like it's like you really got to capture the nuance and the subtlety, especially with Mariko as she's like translating and all that. So I guess like how'd you kind of approach those, making sure those performances really like gonna stand out?
Yeah, well, I guess it was, you know, it's a challenge with certainly with the translation scenes where one character is essentially delivering information and then the second character is delivering the information a second time. So as an audience, you're catching up and catching up. But yeah, it was really just a case of yeah, honing in on the subtext in each scene. So if the subtext is the five regents are meeting and they are forming an alliance against Toranaga, and two of the regents are partnering and the other two regents are partnering. Something like that is in the subtext. Then that was the way that we approached the photography. So it's like, okay, bring those two into alliance, you know, and separate Toranaga, and therefore there's, you know, clean close-ups of one character and over the shoulder close-ups of other characters. You know, we're lucky we generally had two cameras working pretty much, apart from on the certain scenes in the show that are just a single camera move that is you know not cut into any other action. But other than those sort of, you know, 5 or 6 days worth of doing that, the rest of the show is with two cameras. So one camera is on one subtext in the scene, and the other camera is delivering a secondary subtext. You know, I think it's important to you know, there's a lot of words in movies, and they're great and they're written by incredibly talented people, but but oftentimes the emotion comes from an incredible performance of someone listening to somebody else. And so
Mhm.
if you can do that in compositional choices, then that's a lot of fun.
You mentioned the lighting before, and obviously like lighting, like all the research you did. I was fascinated by that too because so much of the show is taking place at night and it looks great. Like it's not like hard to make things out, you know, all that stuff. That I just was, so I'm like kind of blown away how you're able to light so much of this. I guess like how much time was that research and like what like how did you kind of like make sure it looks right? I guess and looks the way it looks.
Yeah. Well, amazing Helen Jarvis, amazing production designer of the show. By the time I had jumped, by the time I was on board with Jonathan Van Tulleken, the director, Helen had probably worked for, I'm not sure, 9 months on pre-visualization and concept material, and she had a great library of architecture, and so yeah, I played catch up and listened to everything that she had to say, and her and her art department team had built some incredible models of the you know, principally Osaka Palace at the time, but scale models with the, you know, real versions of shoji screens, real versions of the sliding doors and the tatami mats and all of that sort of stuff, all to scale. So just after I arrived in Vancouver, I was able to take scaled versions of our light sources and have a look and see, have an experiment and see how light bounced around the spaces. You know, it's a very interesting architectural model where it's very little clutter. There are no tables for you to use as foreground for three-dimensionality. The flooring is essentially a large bounced light source, a bounce for light sources, and the ceiling is a generally dark wood engraved and embossed carvings. And so you kind of have an inversion of a Western standard lighting operating style. You know, no foreground elements for three dimensionality, and generally feel that comes from the floor rather than from the walls and from the ceiling. And with the Engawas, the ingals are specifically designed to keep sunlight from hitting the delicate textiles. And so really it was leaning into that reality that I think gives Shogun its sort of very gritty realness of light and shadow.
Yeah, it's an incredible show and great work. Christopher Ross, cinematographer Shogun on FX. Thank you so much, Christopher.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.